On the night I stood in my cap and gown, waiting for a father who never showed, I promised myself something the next time he needed me. He would discover the price of my silence. That empty chair in the auditorium wasn't just vacant space. It was a declaration of my worthlessness in his eyes. Years later, when millions fell into my hands through sweat and sacrifice he never witnessed, the tables turned. The family ATM finally closed for business, and the daughter they dismissed became the one holding all the cards. My name is Madeline Carter Maddie to anyone who bothered to know me, and I'm 24 years old now, working at Everstead Advisory in downtown Charlotte. But 6 years ago, on a humid June evening in Asheville, North Carolina, I stood in a sea of burgundy caps and gowns, scanning the crowded auditorium for a face that would never appear. The Asheville High School gymnasium smelled of floor wax and nervous excitement. Families packed the bleachers, their cameras flashing like fireflies in the dimness. The principal's voice echoed through the speakers, calling names in alphabetical order: Madison Campbell, Marcus Carpenter, Madeline Carter. I walked across that stage with my head held high, accepting my diploma with a practiced smile. The applause was polite, scattered nothing like the roar that erupted for the star quarterback or the valedictorian. But it wasn't the volume that cut deepest. It was looking out at row G, seat 14, where I'd reserved a spot for Edward Carter, my father. Empty. The red velvet cushion mocked me, pristine and untouched, while every seat around it overflowed with proud parents clutching bouquets and balloons. I'd texted him 3 times that morning, called twice. His assistant had assured me he'd received the invitation I'd mailed 2 months prior, the one with the gold-embossed letters spelling out the date, time, and location. After the ceremony, I stood alone near the exit while my classmates dissolved into warm embraces with their families. Jessica Martinez's father lifted her off the ground in a bear hug. Tyler Johnson's divorced parents managed to stand together for photos, their differences forgotten in their son's moment of triumph. Even Sarah Webb, whose father was deployed overseas, had her uncle drive 6 hours from Tennessee to be there. "Maddie, let's get a picture," my friend Emma called out, her own parents flanking her with matching grins. I squeezed into their family photo, pretending their joy could substitute for my own. Mrs. Henderson even offered to take a solo shot of me, which now lives in my phone's deleted folder, a girl in a cap and gown standing against a cinder block wall, clutching a diploma like a life raft. The worst part came later, at the Applebee's on Tunnel Road where everyone went to celebrate. I sat in a booth meant for 6, party of 1, watching families toast their graduates with chicken tenders and mozzarella sticks. The waitress, a woman named Brenda with kind eyes, kept refilling my Coke without asking, perhaps sensing that I needed something to do with my hands. My phone buzzed at 9:43 p.m. A text from Dad. "Sorry, kiddo. Big merger meeting ran late. You understand? Congratulations." You understand. 2 words that had become his signature. His get-out-of-jail-free card for every missed recital, every forgotten birthday, every broken promise. But that night, sitting in that vinyl booth with my graduation cap wilting beside me, something crystallized in my chest, hard and sharp as diamond. My mother Diane hadn't even bothered with an excuse. She was probably at home with her second glass of wine, lost in whatever reality show was trending. My brother Brent was at his girlfriend's lake house, posting Instagram stories of beer pong and bonfires. The rejection wasn't new, but its public nature, its timing on what should have been my moment that transformed disappointment into something else entirely. I paid my check, leaving Brenda a $20 tip on a $15 meal because she'd been the only person all evening to show me genuine kindness. Walking to my beat-up Honda Civic in the parking lot, still wearing my graduation dress under the gown I couldn't bring myself to remove, I made a promise to that 18-year-old girl reflected in the car window. Never again would I wait for Edward Carter to show up. Never again would I reserve seats for people who viewed my achievements as inconveniences to their schedules. And someday, I didn't know when or how, but someday when they needed me, When they finally looked for Madeline Carter in their moment of desperation, they would find that seat empty. They would taste the abandonment they'd served me so casually all these years. The drive home through the Blue Ridge darkness felt like a passage between two versions of myself. The girl who entered that gymnasium still believed love could be earned through achievement. The woman who left it understood that some debts could only be settled by walking away. The pattern started long before graduation and continued long after. Like clockwork, my phone would light up with my mother's name whenever her credit card bills arrived. "Maddie, sweetheart, I'm just a little short this month. You know how it is." I did know how it was. It was me transferring $400 while eating ramen for the third night straight. Diane Carter had perfected the art of financial manipulation. She never asked directly. She painted pictures of catastrophe. The electricity might get shut off. The car payment was overdue. She might lose her health insurance. Each crisis arrived with surgical precision, usually on the first of the month when she knew my paycheck had cleared. She'd trained me well. Guilt was her currency, and I was her personal ATM. The calls always came at night, after she'd had her wine. "Your father isn't helping with anything." She'd slur slightly. "If it weren't for you, I don't know what I'd do." The irony wasn't lost on me that Dad paid her $3,000 monthly in alimony, but somehow that money evaporated into online shopping sprees and spa treatments while the emergency bills landed on my desk. Then there was Brent, my older brother, the golden child who could do no wrong despite doing nothing right. Every few months, he'd appear with a new investment opportunity that would definitely, absolutely, certainly make us all rich. A food truck that never materialized, a cryptocurrency scheme that collapsed in weeks, a dropshipping business that dropped only my savings into his pocket. "Come on, Maddie," he'd say, flashing that smile that worked on everyone but collection agencies. "It's just 10 grand. I'll pay you back double in 6 months. The last time he'd paid me back was never. I had spreadsheets documenting $43,000 in loans over 4 years, each one annotated with his elaborate promises and my dwindling bank balance. I remember one particular Sunday when I was 22, sitting at my kitchen table with my laptop, trying to figure out how to stretch $800 across rent, utilities, groceries, and Mom's latest crisis. My phone rang. Brent needed $3,000 for a sure-thing real estate seminar. 20 minutes later, Mom called about the mortgage. An hour after that, Dad texted asking if I could handle the property taxes on the family cabin because he was tied up in investments. The family cabin. That was rich. I'd never been invited there. Not once since Dad bought it when I was 19. But somehow, I was responsible for keeping it afloat. Every summer, I'd see Facebook photos of Brent and his friends there. Dad hosting business partners. Mom throwing her book club retreats. The property tax bills. Though those came straight to me. I started keeping receipts, not just financial ones, but emotional ones too. Screenshots of Dad's texts canceling our lunch plans because Brent needed help moving. Voicemails from Mom asking for money while complaining I never visited, ignoring that I worked 60-hour weeks to fund her lifestyle. Photos from Brent's Instagram showing the vacations he took with money he'd borrowed for emergencies. The worst part was the gaslighting. When I'd occasionally push back, suggest they budget better or that Brent get a job, I became the villain. "Family helps family," Dad would say sternly, as if his absence could be compensated with platitudes. "Don't be selfish," Mom would add, while ordering her 4th pair of designer shoes that month. "You're doing well. Don't be stingy." Brent would laugh, keys to his leased BMW jingling in his pocket. Doing well? I was drowning. My credit cards were maxed from covering their expenses. I'd delayed getting my wisdom teeth removed for 2 years because I couldn't afford the copay after funding Brent's latest venture. I wore the same 5 professional outfits on rotation to my job while Mom posted photos in new dresses I'd inadvertently purchased. One evening at 11:30 p.m., after transferring yet another $1,000 to Mom, I sat on my bathroom floor and cried until I threw up. Not from sadness, from rage. pure, distilled rage at being the family wallet, the safety net, the one who could always be counted on to sacrifice while they lived freely on my labor. But I learned something valuable in those years of exploitation: how to hide assets, how to invest silently, how to build wealth they couldn't see or touch. Every dollar they took taught me about financial systems, about protecting resources, about the difference between family and parasites. They thought they were bleeding me dry. They were actually teaching me to become untouchable, while my family dismissed me as just the girl doing accounting work. I was building an empire in silence. At Everstead Advisory, I'd started as a junior analyst, the kind who fetched coffee and formatted spreadsheets. But I had something my colleagues didn't: hunger sharpened by years of deprivation and a talent for seeing patterns in financial fraud that others missed. My breakthrough came with the Steinberg case. A textile manufacturing company had been hemorrhaging money for years, claiming market downturns and supply chain issues. The senior partners had already written it off as a loss, but something in the numbers nagged at me. I spent 3 months of nights and weekends dissecting their financial statements, following paper trails that led through shell companies in Delaware and accounts in the Cayman Islands. At 2:15 a.m. on a Thursday, running on gas station coffee and determination, I founded a systematic embezzlement scheme that had drained $38 million over 7 years. The CFO and 2 board members had orchestrated it brilliantly, but they'd made one mistake: they'd gotten comfortable, sloppy with their patterns. When I presented my findings to the partners, the room went silent. Richard Everstead himself, a man who'd barely acknowledged my existence in 3 years, stood up and shook my hand. "This is exceptional work, Maddie. Exceptional." The recovery litigation took 18 months. I worked alongside forensic accountants and federal investigators, my analysis forming the backbone of the case. We recovered $26 million for our client. My reward wasn't just the bonus or the promotion to senior analyst, it was the equity stake. 2% of Everstead Advisory. They said, vested over 5 years. Just papers. Brent had laughed when I'd mentioned it at a family dinner. Not the amount. Just that I'd gotten equity. Wake me up when it's real money. I didn't tell them when McKenna Capital approached Everstead for a merger 14 months later. I didn't mention the valuation meetings, the due diligence, the negotiations that kept me at the office until dawn. I especially didn't share the final number: Everstead Advisory was acquired for $180 million. My 2%, after taxes and fees, came to $2.6 million. The day the wire transfer hit my account, I sat in my car in the parking garage and stared at my phone screen for 20 minutes. 7 digits. I'd gone from negative net worth to millionaire in a single electronic transaction. My hands shook as I switched to my other banking app, the one showing $300 in checking and maxed out credit cards from my family's latest emergencies. I'd learned to hide my success like others hide their failures. When Mom called that evening asking for help with her car payment, I transferred the money without mentioning that I could now buy her car dealership. When Brent texted about a revolutionary new business opportunity that just needed $15,000 in seed money, I told him I'd need to check my budget. Not that I'd just put $500,000 into a diversified investment portfolio. The discipline came from watching them waste everything they touched. Dad had inherited Grandpa's construction business and run it into bankruptcy within 5 years. Mom had received a settlement from a car accident and blown it on a failed boutique that never opened. Brent had squandered his college fund on poker games and pyramid schemes. They were financial black holes, and I'd learned to orbit at a safe distance. I started making moves quietly, set up a trust that they couldn't touch, bought treasury bonds and index funds under an LLC, invested in real estate through a series of holding companies. Every financial advisor I met complimented my structure designed, they said, like someone protecting assets from future litigation. They didn't know I was protecting them from something worse than lawsuits, family entitlement. At work, I became invaluable. I uncovered fraud in 3 more major cases, saving clients over $50 million in total. Richard started inviting me to partner meetings. Colleagues who'd ignored me now sought my opinion. I was the rising star, the prodigy, the one to watch. But at family gatherings, I remained invisible Maddie, the ATM, the backup plan. They never asked about my work beyond whether I'd gotten my paycheck. They never wondered how I could suddenly afford a nicer apartment or a new laptop. Their disinterest was my camouflage, their dismissiveness my protection. The night I signed the papers finalizing my stake in the merger, I drove past my childhood home. Dad's Mercedes sat in the driveway next to Brent's BMW and Mom's Lexus, all leased, all one missed payment from repossession. Inside, they were probably complaining about their struggles, planning their next scheme, calculating how much they could extract from me this month. They had no idea that their safety net had just become a steel trap, and I held all the springs. The restaurant in Savannah's historic district was Mom's choice. The Gray, housed in a restored Greyhound bus terminal where the prices were as elevated as the cuisine. She'd insisted on somewhere nice for Brent's 32nd birthday, which translated to somewhere expensive enough to make her feel important. As always, she'd made the reservation but forgotten to bring her credit card. "Maddie will get it," she'd announced to the hostess, not even glancing at me. She always does. We sat at a round table near the window, the December evening casting shadows through the industrial glass. Dad arrived 15 minutes late, checking his phone throughout Mom's rehearsed complaint about the traffic. Brent showed up 20 minutes after that with his latest girlfriend, a bottle blonde named Cassidy who looked at the menu prices with barely concealed glee. "So, Maddie," Dad said, finally acknowledging my presence after his second bourbon. "Still pushing papers at that little firm?" "It's not that little," I replied, cutting into my steak. "We manage over $2 billion in assets." Sure, he waved dismissively. "But you're what, 24 now? No boyfriend, no social life, just work, work, work. That's no way for a young woman to live." Brent laughed, that harsh sound I'd grown to hate. "At least I'm living." "Right. Dad, just closed a huge deal with some investors from Atlanta. This time next year, we'll all be celebrating on my yacht." "That's my boy." Dad beamed, clapping Brent's shoulder. "Taking risks, making moves, that's how real success happens. Not by playing it safe in some back office." I watched them perform their ritual of mutual delusion. Dad pretending Brent's deals weren't scams. Brent pretending Dad's approval meant something. Mom pretending we were the kind of family that gathered for love rather than money. Cassidy ordered the $40 lobster tail without asking, and Mom got a third glass of the most expensive wine on the menu. "You know," Mom said, her voice taking on that false concern I knew preceded a dig. "Mrs. Henderson's daughter just got engaged. Remember Emma? From your high school, she's marrying a doctor. Her mother's so proud." "Good for Emma," I said flatly. "I'm just saying," Mom continued, "maybe if you spent less time buried in spreadsheets and more time, making yourself available." "She's probably waiting for someone who can support her lifestyle," Brent interrupted, smirking. "All those student loans, right, Maddie hard to date when you're broke." The table laughed. Even Cassidy, who'd known me for exactly 45 minutes, felt comfortable enough to giggle at my expense. I felt that familiar burn in my chest, the same one from graduation night, from every family gathering where I'd been the punchline. "Speaking of money," Dad said, transitioning smoothly, "I've got a situation with the cabin. Some tax issue, you know how these government people are? Think you could handle it?" "Maddie, just this once. Just this once. Like the hundreds of other times that were supposedly just once. And my car needs new tires," Mom added quickly, sensing an opening. "The roads have been so dangerous lately." "I'd hate to have an accident because I couldn't afford proper tires." "Oh, and that investor thing I mentioned," Brent jumped in. "I just need another $5,000 to seal the deal. You'll get it back triple in 3 months. Guaranteed." They all looked at me expectantly. Forks paused mid-air, waiting for the ATM to dispense. The waiter appeared with the check $387. Without a word, I handed him my credit card, the same one I'd been using to cover their expenses for years. "You're the best, sweetheart," Mom cooed. already forgetting that she'd just implied I was a failure at life. We're so lucky to have someone so reliable, reliable, responsible, dependable, never successful, never impressive, never worth celebrating, just the safety net, expected to catch them whenever they jumped off their latest cliff of poor decisions. As we walked to our cars, Brent pulled me aside. "Hey, about that $5,000, I really need it by Monday. This deal won't wait." "What's the company?" I asked, knowing he wouldn't have an answer. "It's complicated, technical stuff. You wouldn't understand the business side of things." I looked at my brother, really looked at him. 32 years old, never held a job for more than 6 months, living off charm and other people's money. Behind him, Dad was getting into his Mercedes, already on a call about some imaginary crisis. Mom was taking selfies by the restaurant's neon sign, crafting the perfect image of a family dinner that never really happened. "I'll think about it," I told Brent, the same thing I'd been saying for months. "Don't think too long," he said, his voice edged with irritation. "Some of us are actually trying to make something of ourselves." That night, alone in my apartment, I pulled up my investment portfolio on my laptop. $2.6 million in liquid assets, another $800,000 in real estate, steady returns from index funds. The irony was suffocating. I had more money than all of them combined would ever see, and they thought I was the failure. I poured myself a glass of wine, good wine, not the cheap stuff from my ramen days, and made a decision. They wanted to laugh at Invisible Maddie, the lonely workaholic with nothing to show for her life. Fine. Let them laugh. They wouldn't be laughing much longer. The dismantling began on a Tuesday morning at 6:45 a.m. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, a legal pad, and 7 years of meticulous records. Every supplementary credit card, every shared account, every financial tentacle they'd wrapped around my life, I had documented them all. First, the credit cards. Mom had a supplementary card on my Chase account with a $12,000 limit. She'd treated it like her personal shopping pass, running up charges at Nordstrom and Saks while I paid the bills. I clicked through to the account management page, found her card, and hit Remove Authorized User. A pop-up asked me to confirm. I clicked yes without hesitation. Brent had 2 cards, one on my Capital One account, another on my American Express. He'd used them for business expenses that mysteriously included bottle service at nightclubs and weekend trips to Vegas. Remove, confirm, remove, confirm. Each click felt like cutting a rope that had been strangling me for years. Dad was trickier. He'd co-signed my first credit card when I was 18, then somehow convinced me to add him as an authorized user for emergencies. His emergencies included golf club memberships and client dinners that his failed business couldn't afford. Remove, confirm. The system warned me this action couldn't be undone. Perfect. Next came the streaming services, phone plans, and subscriptions. I'd been paying for a family Netflix account, HBO Max, Disney Plus, 3 cell phone lines, and even Mom's subscription to a Wine of the Month club. One by one, I removed their profiles, changed the passwords, and downgraded to individual accounts. My phone bill alone dropped by $240 a month. The hardest part was the lake house, though. Hardest meant most legally complex, not emotionally difficult. The property had been purchased 5 years ago, officially as a family investment. But I'd paid the down payment, made every mortgage payment, covered all maintenance and taxes. The deed, through what Dad called an oversight, but I now recognized as calculated manipulation, was in my name only. I'd found a buyer 2 weeks earlier through a private sale arranged by my real estate attorney, a tech executive from Atlanta looking for a weekend retreat, willing to pay cash, happy to close quickly. $850,000 for a property I'd bought at $500,000. The paperwork was already drawn up. I just needed to sign. My phone started buzzing at 7:30 a.m. Mom, trying to buy her morning latte. Card declined. I let it go to voicemail. 8:15 a.m. Brent at a gas station. Card declined. By 9, a.m. I had 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. I turned my phone to silent and drove to my attorney's office. Margaret Reeves was a sharp woman in her 60s who specialized in asset protection. She'd helped me structure my holdings after the merger, and she'd asked no questions when I explained I needed to simplify my financial obligations. "The buyer's ready to close Friday," she said, sliding the papers across her mahogany desk. "Once you sign, there's no going back." "There's already no going back," I replied, signing my name with the Mont Blanc pen she offered. "The proceeds will be wired to your trust account," Margaret continued, "completely separate from any joint holdings, inaccessible to anyone but you." As I signed the last page, she looked at me over her reading glasses. "Family troubles. Family clarification," I corrected. Back in my car, I turned my phone on to find 97 missed calls. The family group chat, which I'd muted months ago, showed 200 new messages. I scrolled through them with detached fascination. "Mom, Maddie, something's wrong with the card." "Brent, WTF, my card isn't working." "Dad, Madeline, call me immediately." "Mom, this is unacceptable." "Brent, are you seriously this petty?" I pulled up my banking app and initiated the final step. The joint checking account I'd foolishly opened with Mom for convenience still had $32,000, my emergency fund she didn't know about. I transferred every penny to my personal account and submitted the closure request. The savings account I'd let Brent access for his investments got the same treatment: empty, close, done, by noon. I'd erased 7 years of financial entanglement, every subscription canceled, every card deactivated, every shared account closed. The lake house would be someone else's by Friday. My credit report would finally show just my name, my choices, my future. The liberation was intoxicating. I sat in my car in the law office parking lot, windows down, feeling lighter than I had since I was 18. My phone continued its frantic buzzing, more calls, more texts, more voicemails I wouldn't listen to. Each vibration was a validation, proof that they'd finally noticed the well had run dry. I drove to my favorite coffee shop, the one I'd stopped going to because $4 lattes seemed like an insane luxury when I was funding 3 other people's lives. I ordered a large caramel macchiato with an extra shot, paid with my personal credit card, the one only I could use, and tipped the barista $10 just because I could. Sitting by the window, watching the rain start to fall on downtown Charlotte, I pulled up my investment portfolio again. Every dollar in it was mine, earned by my work, protected by my planning, invisible to the parasites who'd fed on me for so long. They thought I was nothing more than a wallet with a pulse. They were about to learn that wallets could be snapped shut. My phone rang again. "Dad!" I watched his name flash on the screen, counted 5 rings, then watched it go to voicemail. The phone immediately rang again. Mom this time, then Brent, then Dad again. Let them call. Let them panic. Let them feel, for once, the cold reality of being cut off, of reaching for support and finding empty air. I'd felt that sensation on graduation night and every day since. Now it was their turn. The storm hit in waves. First came the confused disbelief, text messages asking if there was a technical glitch with the cards. Then anger, voicemails escalating from irritated to furious. By Wednesday evening, they'd reached the final stage: coordinated assault. Mom's first coherent message came at 8:20 p. Madeline Elizabeth Carter, what have you done? The mortgage payment bounced. The mortgage. Do you want me homeless? Is that what you want? Your own mother on the street. The mortgage she could easily pay with her alimony if she didn't spend it on designer handbags and spa treatments. I archived the message without responding. Dad's approach was more corporate. A voicemail left in his business voice. Madeline, this is unacceptable and frankly illegal. You can't just cut off access to shared family assets. I expect a callback within the hour, or I'll be forced to involve my attorney. His attorney, who'd been disbarred 3 years ago for embezzlement. I almost laughed. But Brent went nuclear. At 11:45 p.m. on Thursday, I woke to pounding on my apartment door. Through the peephole, I could see him, disheveled and red-faced, slamming his fist against the wood. "Maddie, open this door right now. You've destroyed everything. Everything that investor pulled out because I couldn't show proof of funds. 3 years of work, gone." I stood silent in my entryway, watching him rage. Mrs. Patterson from 4B peered out her door, and I heard her threaten to call the police. Brent must have heard her too, because his pounding shifted to a desperate pleading. "Please, Maddie, please, I'm begging you. Just talk to me. I'm your brother, your family. You can't do this to family." Family. The word that had chained me for so long, now meaningless as smoke. The lake house. "Maddie, at least tell me what's happening with the lake house. Mom says you're not answering about the property tax. It's due tomorrow." Tomorrow. When the sale would close and the house would belong to someone who'd actually enjoy it, not use it as a free vacation rental while sending me the bills. I texted building security about a disturbance in the hallway. Within 10 minutes, I heard them escorting Brent out, his protests echoing down the corridor. Friday morning brought the nuclear option of family group text from Mom. "Your father, brother and I are driving to Charlotte. We'll be at your office at noon. This has gone far enough. You will explain yourself." My office, where I'd built my reputation, earned my success, where the partners knew me as a rising star. They were going to make a scene at my workplace, the one place I'd kept sacred from their chaos. I called Margaret, my attorney. "They're threatening to show up at my work." "Do you feel unsafe?" she asked immediately. "No, but I need to control this situation. The building has security. Alert them. If your family creates a disturbance, they'll be escorted out. You could also file for a restraining order." A restraining order against my own family. 6 months ago, the thought would have destroyed me. Now it seemed like a logical next step. At 11:30 a.m., I informed building security about potential unwanted visitors. At 11:45 a.m., I watched from my office window as Dad's Mercedes pulled into the visitor lot. They emerged like a dysfunctional army dad in his outdated suit, Mom in her desperate attempt at professional wear, Brent looking like he'd slept in his car. My phone buzzed. Reception. "Ms. Carter, there are 3 people here claiming to be your family. They're quite insistent about seeing you. Please tell them I'm unavailable and ask them to leave. If they refuse, follow standard security protocol." I watched from my 10th floor window as the drama unfolded below. Even from this height, I could see Mom's theatrical gestures, Dad's aggressive finger-pointing, Brent's attempt to push past security. It took exactly 12 minutes for Charlotte PD to arrive. Richard Everstead knocked on my door. "Maddie, everything all right? There seems to be some commotion downstairs. A personal matter that won't affect my work. Richard, I apologize for any disturbance." He studied me for a moment. This woman who'd made his firm millions, who'd never brought drama to the office before. "If you need anything time off, legal resources, let me know." "Thank you, it's being handled." By 1 p.m., they were gone, escorted off the property with trespass warnings. The texts started immediately. "Mom, how dare you have us removed like criminals?" "Dad, this is beyond unacceptable. You're dead to me." "Brent, you're not my sister anymore. You're nothing. Dead to him. Nothing to them." The words that might have shattered me once now felt like freedom. I'd been nothing to them at graduation, nothing when I was struggling, nothing when I was succeeding in silence. Now, when my nothing included millions they couldn't touch. Suddenly, I mattered. That evening, Mom sent one final message. The realtor called about the lake house. Said it's been sold. That was our house. Maddie. Ours. You stole from your own family. I typed my first response in 3 days. I sold my property, purchased with my money, maintained by my payments. Every document proves it. You stole from me for 7 years. Consider us even. Then I blocked all 3 numbers, deleted the family group chat, and poured myself a glass of champagne. The storm had passed, and I was still standing. More than standing, I was thriving, free, and finally visible to the only person who'd ever really mattered, myself. 2 weeks of silence followed the storm. Then, on a Sunday evening, an email arrived from Dad's personal account with the subject line, "Family meeting, urgent." He'd CC'd Mom and Brent, and somehow found my work email since I'd blocked their numbers. "Madeline, your mother and I request your presence for a family discussion Tuesday evening at 7 p.m. at our home. This is your opportunity to explain your actions and work toward a resolution. We expect you to attend." Request. Expect. As if they still held any authority over me. I almost deleted it, but something made me pause. Perhaps it was curiosity, or maybe the part of me that needed to see their faces when they finally understood their ATM was permanently closed. I replied with 2 words, "I'll come." Tuesday arrived gray and drizzling. I dressed carefully, my best suit. The designer watch I'd bought myself after the merger. The diamond earrings that cost more than Mom's monthly alimony. If this was to be our final confrontation, I'd face them as who I really was, not who they'd forced me to pretend to be. I also came prepared. My leather portfolio contained 7 years of documentation, bank statements, transfer records, receipts, tax documents, every dollar they'd taken, every payment I'd made, every asset I'd funded. Margaret had helped me prepare a comprehensive summary, 43 pages of financial evidence that told the real story of our family dynamics. The house looked smaller than I remembered, its facade needing paint, the garden overgrown. I parked my new Tesla, a recent purchase I'd paid cash for, behind Brent's BMW, which I noticed had a repossession notice tucked under the windshield wiper. Mom answered the door, her face a mask of controlled fury. "Well, you came?" The living room had been staged like a tribunal. Dad sat in his leather chair, the one he'd always called his throne. Brent lounged on the couch, trying to look casual but betraying his anxiety by tapping his foot. Mom gestured to a single chair facing them, the interrogation seat. I remained standing. "Sit down, Madeline," Dad commanded. "I'll stand." I set my portfolio on the coffee table with a deliberate thud. "You wanted to talk. Talk." "You've destroyed this family," Mom began, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. "Cut us off without warning, sold family property, humiliated us in public. Let me stop you there." I opened the portfolio and pulled out the first document. January 5th, 2019. Mom requested $3,000 for emergency medical bills. I have the transfer receipt and the credit card statement showing those funds went to a Las Vegas trip with your book club. I placed the paper on the table and pulled out another. March 12th, 2019. Brent needed $5,000 for a business license. Here's the transfer, and here's the Instagram posts from Cancun that same week. Page after page, I laid out the evidence. The pattern was undeniable, the numbers staggering. 7 years, $287,000 in direct transfers, $63,000 in credit card charges, $94,000 in payments for the lake house none of you ever invited me to, $444,000 total. The room was silent except for the rain against the windows. "That doesn't include," I continued, pulling out more documents. "The missed graduations, the forgotten birthdays, the times you literally laughed at me for being just a bookkeeper while spending money I earned. This one's my favorite." I held up a screenshot. Dad telling his golf buddies that Brent was the successful one in the family. Posted the same day I messaged him about my promotion. He never responded to me, but had time for 18 holes. "That's not—" "You don't understand the full context," Dad started, but his voice lacked its usual authority. "The context," I laughed. Actually laughed. "The context is that I was your wallet. Nothing more. And you know what I accepted it? For years. I accepted it because I thought that's what family meant. Until that night in Savannah when you all sat there laughing at me. The failure, the spinster, the boring one with nothing going for her." "We were just joking," Brent muttered. "No, you were telling the truth as you saw it. I was nothing to you except a resource to exploit. Well, congratulations, you were right. I am nothing to you now. Exactly as much nothing as you were to me at graduation, at every birthday, at every moment that mattered. I pulled out the final document, a single page Margaret had prepared. This is a cease and desist letter. Any further attempts to contact me at work, at home, or through third parties will be considered harassment. Any claims to assets in my name will be treated as fraud. This is where our relationship ends. Mom started crying real tears this time. Maddie, please, we're your family. No, I said quietly. Family shows up. Family celebrates your wins and cushions your losses. Family doesn't laugh at you while picking your pocket. You're not my family. You're just people I used to know. Dad stood up, his face purple with rage. You walk out that door. You're cut off from this family forever. No inheritance, no holiday gatherings, no. What inheritance? I interrupted. The debt, the broken promises, the emotional bills you've been passing to me since I was 18. Keep it all. I closed the portfolio and picked it up. I've been cut off from this family since the night you missed my graduation. It just took me 6 years and $2.6 million to realize it. $2.6 million. Brent's voice cracked. You have $2.6 million. I have much more than that now. The lake house sale, the investments, the properties you never knew about. But you'll never see a penny of it. Not because I'm cruel, but because you taught me well, family helps family, and you made it clear I was never really family. I walked to the door, then turned back for one last look at their stunned faces. That empty chair at graduation. It wasn't just empty that night. It's been empty my whole life. The only difference now is that I've stopped saving it a seat. I walked out of my childhood home into the rain, each drop feeling like a baptism washing away 24 years of obligation disguised as love. Behind me, I heard Brent shouting something about betrayal, Mom wailing about cruelty, Dad threatening lawsuits he couldn't afford. Their voices faded as I reached my Tesla, swallowed by the storm that seemed to mirror the chaos I was leaving behind. The leather seat embraced me as I sat in the driver's seat, not starting the engine yet, just breathing. In the rearview mirror, I could see the house lit up like a stage, shadows moving frantically behind curtains. They were probably strategizing, planning how to manipulate me back into funding their lives. They didn't understand yet that I was already gone, had been gone since that empty graduation seat taught me my worth in their eyes. I drove through familiar streets that suddenly felt foreign, past the high school where I'd stood alone in my cap and gown, past the bank where I'd opened my first account with Dad as a co-signer, the beginning of my financial servitude. Each landmark was a milestone in a journey I was finally ending. My phone, now unblocked for business purposes, showed 17 missed calls from unknown numbers, probably them using other people's phones. I'd also received emails from extended family members, sudden concerned messages from aunts and cousins who hadn't spoken to me in years. The family telephone game had already begun, painting me as the villain who'd abandoned poor, struggling relatives. I deleted them all without reading. At my apartment, I stood on my balcony overlooking Charlotte's skyline, the city lights blurred by rain on glass. 7 months ago, I'd stood in this same spot, stomach cramped from eating ramen for the 5th day straight after paying Mom's credit card bill. Now I stood here free, wealthy, and completely alone, but it was a different kind of alone. Not the isolation of being surrounded by people who saw you as nothing, but the solitude of someone who'd chosen themselves. My phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. The cease and desist has been formally filed. They've been legally notified. Any further contact will have consequences. Consequences. Something they'd never faced before. Insulated by my enabling. Protected by my misguided loyalty. 3 weeks later, I heard through professional channels that Dad's Mercedes had been repossessed. A month after that, a colleague mentioned seeing the lake house listing back on the market. The new owners were flipping it for profit. Mom's social media, which I checked from a fake account out of curiosity, showed a dramatic downgrade in lifestyle. No more designer bags or spa days, just bitter posts about family betrayal and ungrateful children. Brent was the one who tried the hardest to break through. He created new email accounts, had girlfriends message me, even showed up at Everstead once more, only to be escorted out before reaching the elevator. His last attempt was a letter, handwritten, slipped under my apartment door somehow. I recognized his handwriting and threw it in the trash unopened. Whatever words he'd chosen to manipulate me with would die unread. But the most interesting development came 6 months later. I was at a charity gala for childhood literacy, something I could finally afford to support when Emma Henderson approached me, my old friend from high school, the one whose family photo I'd borrowed on graduation night. Maddie, oh my God, I heard you were doing amazing things. My mom said she saw in the paper about your work with that big fraud case. We talked for an hour, and she never once mentioned my family. Later, she admitted she'd heard about the estrangement through the suburban gossip network. Honestly, she said over wine, people are impressed. Everyone knew how they treated you. My mom still talks about that graduation night, how you sat alone at Applebee's. She said it broke her heart. Brenda. I remembered the kind waitress. Yeah, that's my mom. She came home that night so upset, said she watched you trying not to cry over your Coke refills. She's actually here tonight if you want to say hi. I did say hi, and Brenda hugged me like the mother I'd never really had. I'm so proud of you, honey, she whispered. Not for the money stuff everyone's talking about, for finally choosing yourself. That's what it came down to, choosing myself. The millions were just numbers in accounts, symbols of success that meant nothing to people who'd never valued my actual worth. The real fortune was the freedom to build a life without parasites, to succeed without apologizing, to exist without owing anyone my existence. I still drive past that old house sometimes, usually at night when the memories feel too heavy. It's darker now. The electricity probably shut off for non-payment. The garden's dead. The paint's peeling worse. And there's a sense of abandonment that matches what I felt all those years. But I don't stop. I don't slow down. I just keep driving toward the life I built from the ashes of their neglect. Millions in the bank and not a penny of guilt in my heart. They wanted me to be nothing. I became everything, just nothing to them. The empty chair at graduation taught me my first lesson in abandonment. Their empty hands reaching for my millions taught them their last lesson in consequences. We're even now, balanced at zero, exactly where they always placed my value. And that's the thing about refusing to share your millions with people who couldn't share their minutes. It's not about revenge. It's about recognition. Recognizing that some chairs are meant to stay empty, some bonds are meant to be broken, and some fortunes, financial and otherwise, are meant to be kept far from those who'd waste them. I was Madeline Carter, the invisible daughter, the family ATM, the one who showed up when no one else would. Now I'm Maddie Carter, millionaire, survivor, and proof that sometimes the best family you can have is the one you leave behind. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share your own thoughts and experiences. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is refuse to share our success with those who never shared our struggles.